The alarm clock buzzed at 7 in the morning, and 12-year-old Danny opened his eyes with a smile already forming on his face. Today was the day. His birthday. The one day of the year that was supposed to be special. The one day that was all about him. He stretched under his thin blanket and looked around his small bedroom, taking in the posters on the wall and the stack of library books on his nightstand. He could hear his mom moving around in the kitchen. The smell of toast drifted under his door, and for a moment everything felt perfect. Danny jumped out of bed and pulled on his favorite jeans and the shirt he'd picked out the night before. He wanted to look good today, really good. Because today wasn't just any birthday. Today was the day he was finally going to have friends over. When he walked into the kitchen, his mom was already dressed in her nurse's scrubs, her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. She looked tired. She always looked tired these days. But when she saw him, her face softened into a smile. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said, pulling him into a quick hug. "I'm so sorry, but I have to head to work early. They called me in for a double shift." Danny's smile faltered just a little, but he nodded. He understood. His mom worked hard to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. It had been just the two of them for as long as he could remember, and he knew she was doing her best. "It's okay, Mom," he said, trying to sound brave. "We can celebrate later, right?" "Absolutely. I promise." She kissed the top of his head and grabbed her bag. "There's a cupcake in the fridge for you. Light the candle and make a wish. I'll be home late tonight. But we'll do something special this weekend, okay?" And just like that, she was gone. The apartment fell silent except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Danny stood in the kitchen for a moment listening to the quiet. He'd gotten used to being alone, but today felt different. Today was supposed to be different. He opened the fridge and found the cupcake his mom had mentioned. It was chocolate with bright blue frosting, a little squished on one side with a single candle stuck in the middle. She must have picked it up from the discount bakery on her way home last night. Danny pulled it out and set it on the counter, staring at it for a long moment before putting it back. He'd save it for later. For when everyone arrived, the invitations had gone out 3 weeks ago. Danny had spent an entire Saturday afternoon at the library, carefully writing out each one by hand. He'd invited everyone in his class, 23 kids. He'd even invited a few people he didn't know that well, hoping that maybe this would be his chance to finally make some real friends. Middle school had been harder than he'd expected. Kids already had their groups, their inside jokes, their lunch tables. Danny usually ate alone, a book propped open in front of him so it looked like he was too busy reading to care about sitting by himself. But the party was going to change all that. He'd planned everything carefully. Chips, soda, paper plates with superheroes on them. He'd even downloaded a playlist of popular songs he thought kids his age would like. His mom had given him $40 from her tips to spend on supplies, and he'd stretched every penny at the dollar store. Now it was time to set everything up. Danny pulled out the decorations he'd hidden in his closet. Streamers in red and blue, a banner that said "Happy Birthday" in big letters, and a pack of balloons. He spent the next 2 hours transforming their small living room. He taped streamers across the ceiling, hung the banner over the couch, and blew up every single balloon until his cheeks hurt. He arranged the folding chairs they owned in a big circle, then added a few cushions from the couch to make more seats. When he was done, he stepped back and looked at his work. The apartment had never looked like this before. It looked like a real party was about to happen. It looked like the kind of place where kids would want to hang out. Danny felt a surge of pride mixed with nervous excitement. What if people didn't come? What if they thought his place was too small, too shabby? What if they made fun of the dollar store decorations? He pushed those thoughts away. They would come. They had to come. He'd handed each invitation out personally, made sure to smile and say, "I really hope you can make it." Most kids had nodded or said maybe or "we'll see." Nobody had said no. That was a good sign, right? The party was supposed to start at 1 o'clock. Danny had written it clearly on each invitation. 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock. 4 whole hours of fun. At 11:30, he started putting out the snacks. He'd bought 3 different kinds of chips, a box of cookies, and 6 bottles of soda. He arranged everything on the coffee table, trying to make it look abundant even though he knew it wasn't much. He'd seen the snack tables at other kids' parties, the ones with parents who had money. Tables overflowing with candy and pizza and cake. This was what he could afford, and it would have to be enough. By 12:30, Danny was pacing. He'd changed his shirt twice, finally settling on the first one he'd picked out. He checked his phone obsessively, even though nobody had his number except his mom. He looked out the window at the parking lot below, watching for any sign of arriving guests. The minutes crawled by like hours. 1 o'clock came. Danny sat on the edge of the couch, his hands folded in his lap, listening for footsteps in the hallway outside. Listening for the sound of voices, of laughter, of someone knocking on his door. He heard Mrs. Peterson from down the hall dragging her shopping cart. He heard the couple upstairs arguing like they always did on Sundays. He heard a dog barking somewhere in the building, but no knock came. By 1:15, he told himself people were just running late. Everyone was always running late to things. That was normal. That was fine. He got up and adjusted the banner, which had started to sag on one side. He straightened the cups he'd set out. He turned on the playlist, then quickly turned it off because it felt weird to have music playing with nobody there. 1:30. Still nothing. Danny tried to stay positive. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe everyone was coming together and they were just taking longer to organize. Maybe they'd all walk in at the same time and it would be this great surprise. He imagined the door bursting open, kids flooding in with presents and smiles and birthday wishes. 2 o'clock. The apartment remained silent. Danny's stomach started to hurt. He checked his phone again, hoping for a text message, anything. But there was nothing. He walked to the window and looked out again. The parking lot was quiet. A few cars came and went, but none of them stopped. None of them brought anyone for him. By 2:30, the hope that had been burning in his chest all morning started to flicker and fade. He sat back down on the couch, the party decorations mocking him from every corner of the room. The balloons bobbed cheerfully. The streamers hung in perfect loops. Everything was ready for a party that nobody was coming to. He thought about the invitations again. Had he given them to the right people? Had he written the wrong date? No, he'd triple-checked everything. He'd been so careful. Maybe the invitations had seemed too childish. Maybe kids his age didn't want to go to birthday parties anymore. Maybe they'd all made plans together to do something else instead. The worst part was not knowing why, not having an answer. Just sitting there in his decorated apartment alone while somewhere out there, 23 kids were doing other things. Things that didn't involve him. Danny got up and walked to the kitchen. He opened a bag of chips and ate a few, but they tasted like nothing. He wasn't even hungry. He just needed something to do with his hands. The afternoon stretched ahead of him, long and empty, and he had no idea how he was going to fill it. 3 o'clock came and went. Danny had given up sitting on the couch like he was waiting for something. Instead, he turned on the television, flipping through channels without really watching anything. A cooking show played in the background. Someone was making a fancy cake with layers and frosting designs that probably cost more than his mom made in a week. He changed the channel. A game show. A bunch of happy people winning prizes and hugging each other. He changed it again. A nature documentary about wolves. That was better. Wolves didn't have birthday parties. Wolves didn't feel left out. He'd eaten more than half the chips now, the ones he'd carefully arranged on the coffee table. The ones that were supposed to be for sharing. It didn't matter anymore. Nobody was coming to share them. He knew that now, even though part of him still jumped every time he heard a noise in the hallway. That part of him that couldn't quite let go of hope, even when hope was clearly a stupid thing to hold on to. His phone sat next to him on the couch, dark and silent. He picked it up and scrolled through his minimal contact list. Mom, the dentist office, the school's main number. That was it. 3 contacts. He opened his messages, looking at the last conversation with his mom from this morning. Have a wonderful birthday, baby. Love you so much. He didn't reply. What would he say? That nobody came? That he'd spent his birthday money on food that nobody was eating? That would just make her feel bad. And she already felt bad enough about having to work. He thought about the kids at school. Where were they right now? Were they hanging out together, talking about how they'd all decided not to go to his party? Were they laughing about the awkward kid who'd handed out invitations like it was elementary school? The more he thought about it, the more his stomach twisted into knots. Tomorrow he'd have to face them all. He'd have to walk into class and pretend like nothing happened. Pretend like he hadn't spent hours decorating for a party that nobody wanted to attend. By 3:30, Danny made a decision. He got up and started taking down the decorations. There was no point in leaving them up. His mom would be home late, almost midnight probably, and she'd see this sad scene. The decorated apartment with one kid sitting alone. That would break her heart, and she didn't need that. She worked too hard to come home to something that would make her feel like she'd failed him somehow. He pulled down the streamers carefully, folding them up so they wouldn't get wrinkled. Maybe he could use them for something else later. The birthday banner came down next. He rolled it up and tucked it back in its package. The balloons were trickier. He thought about popping them, but the noise would be too loud, too final. Instead, he gathered them up and shoved them in his closet, their strings tangled together. They could deflate slowly in there where he didn't have to look at them. The folding chairs went back to their usual spot, stacked against the wall. The cushions returned to the couch. The paper cups and plates, still in their plastic wrapping, went under the sink with the other supplies. Within 20 minutes, the apartment looked like it always did. Small, plain, empty, like nothing special had been about to happen. Danny stood in the middle of the living room and felt something heavy settle in his chest. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was something deeper. A kind of loneliness that made him understand, really understand that he didn't fit in, that whatever other kids had, whatever made them want to hang out together and be friends, he didn't have it. He was missing some crucial piece that everyone else seemed to be born with. He went back to the couch and stared at the television without seeing it. The wolves were hunting now, working together as a pack. Even wolves had each other. The thought made him feel ridiculous. Here he was, jealous of wolves, but at least wolves had a place where they belonged. 4 o'clock. His neighbor's door opened and closed. He heard footsteps in the hallway, the shuffle of someone walking slowly, probably Mrs. Chen. She was older, maybe in her 70s, and she moved carefully. He'd talked to her a few times when they ran into each other at the mailboxes. She was always friendly, always asked how school was going, always said things like, "You're such a good boy," in a way that made him feel like maybe she meant it. This morning, when he'd been bringing in the last of his party supplies, she'd seen him struggling with the bags. She'd asked what the occasion was, and when he'd told her it was his birthday party, her whole face had lit up. "How wonderful. I hope you have the most marvelous time," she'd said. She'd even asked what time it started, like she was genuinely interested. He'd told her 1 o'clock, and she'd nodded, saying something about how special birthdays were when you were young. That had been this morning. Now it was 4 o'clock, and he wondered if she knew, if she could somehow tell through the walls that nobody had come, if she could hear the silence that filled his apartment instead of the sound of 12-year-olds laughing and having fun. Danny got up and wandered into the kitchen. He opened the fridge and stared at the cupcake his mom had left. The candle was still stuck in it, waiting to be lit, waiting for a wish that felt pointless now. What would he even wish for? Friends? You couldn't wish people into liking you. That wasn't how life worked. He closed the fridge without taking the cupcake out. He wasn't in the mood for it. Eating birthday cake alone felt even sadder than just being alone. He filled a glass with water and drank it slowly, looking out the small kitchen window. He could see part of the playground from here, the one attached to the elementary school a block away. Kids were playing there right now. Little kids, maybe 7 or 8 years old, running around without a care in the world. When had things gotten so complicated? When had just making friends become this impossible task? Back in the living room, Danny looked at the coffee table. The snacks were still there, opened and half-eaten. The soda bottles stood in a row, unopened. He should put everything away, clean up the evidence of his failure, but he couldn't seem to make himself do it. Some part of him was still holding out hope, even though it was after 4 now, even though the party was supposed to end at 5, even though it was completely, obviously, painfully clear that nobody was coming. He picked up his phone again and did something he'd been avoiding. He opened social media. He hardly ever posted anything himself, but he looked sometimes, scrolled through other people's lives, and there it was. Exactly what he'd been afraid of seeing. A photo posted an hour ago. 6 kids from his class at the arcade downtown. They were all making faces at the camera, holding game tickets, laughing. "Best Sunday ever," the caption read. Danny stared at the photo. He recognized every face. He'd given every one of them an invitation. They weren't busy. They hadn't forgotten. They'd just chosen to do something else instead. Something that didn't include him. He closed the app and set his phone face down on the couch. The nature documentary had ended. Now it was some kind of talk show with an audience clapping and cheering. He turned off the television. The silence that followed felt enormous. He could hear the refrigerator humming, the upstairs neighbors walking around, a siren somewhere in the distance, the sounds of life happening all around him while he sat here alone. 4:30. Danny thought about calling his mom, but what would he say? She was at work dealing with patients, doing important things. She couldn't leave just because her kid was having a bad day. Besides, she'd ask questions. She'd want to know how the party went. He'd have to explain that nobody came, and then she'd feel guilty for not being there, and then she'd probably cry. And he couldn't handle that on top of everything else. He got up and went to his bedroom. His bookshelf was full of library books, stories about kids who went on adventures and solved mysteries and had friends who stuck by them no matter what. He pulled one out, a book he'd read twice already, and climbed onto his bed. Maybe he could lose himself in someone else's story for a while. Maybe he could pretend to be somewhere else, someone who people actually wanted to be around. But he couldn't concentrate on the words. He kept reading the same paragraph over and over, not taking in any of it. His mind kept drifting back to the empty living room, to the invitations he'd handed out so hopefully, to the moment tomorrow when he'd have to walk into school and face everyone who'd chosen not to come. Would they say anything? Would they apologize or make excuses? Or would they just ignore it? Pretend like nothing happened, like they'd never seen his invitations at all? That might actually be worse. At least if they acknowledged it, if they said something mean or made fun of him, he'd know where he stood. The uncertainty was its own kind of torture. Danny set the book aside and lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. There was a water stain in the corner, shaped kind of like a cloud. He'd stared at it countless times, made up stories about it when he couldn't sleep. Today it just looked like a stain. He thought about birthdays from when he was little. He barely remembered them, but there were photos. His mom always made sure to take photos. Him at age 5, covered in chocolate cake. Him at age 7, opening a present. He'd been happy then. Or at least he'd looked happy. When had things changed? When had he become the kind of kid who threw parties that nobody came to? The afternoon dragged on, each minute feeling like an hour. Danny stayed in his room, listening to the sounds of the building around him. Other people's lives continuing on. Other people's normal Sunday afternoons. He wondered what it felt like to be normal. To have friends who texted you and made plans with you and actually showed up when they said they would. 5 o'clock came. The party was officially over. An event that never happened. Danny finally got up and went back to the living room. He started putting away the food for real this time. Danny was in the kitchen shoving the unopened soda bottles back into the fridge when he heard it. A knock at the door. Not a soft knock, but a firm, intentional one. The kind of knock that meant someone was actually trying to get his attention. He froze, a bottle still in his hand. For a second, he thought maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe he'd wanted to hear it so badly that his brain had created the sound out of nothing. But then it came again. 3 solid knocks. Someone was definitely there. His heart started racing. He set the bottle down on the counter and walked slowly toward the door, almost afraid to hope. Maybe it was just a delivery person. Maybe it was someone looking for a different apartment. Maybe it was Mrs. Chen needing to borrow something. It couldn't be someone here for the party. Not now. Not at 5:30, 4.5 hours after it was supposed to start. Danny looked through the peephole and saw a man standing in the hallway. He was maybe 35 or so, wearing jeans and a polo shirt. He didn't look threatening, but he didn't look familiar either. The man noticed the peephole darkening and stepped back a little, giving Danny a better view. He held up his hands in a friendly gesture like he understood this might be weird. "Hey there," the man said, his voice muffled through the door but kind. "My name's Robert. I'm Mrs. Chen's grandson. She asked me to stop by. Is it okay if we talk for a minute?" Mrs. Chen's grandson. Danny had heard her mention family before, but he'd never met any of them. He hesitated, his hand on the doorknob. His mom had always told him not to open the door for strangers when he was home alone. But this wasn't really a stranger if he was Mrs. Chen's family, right? And something about the way the man stood there, patient and unthreatening, made Danny feel like maybe it was okay. He unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door a crack, leaving the chain on. "Hi," he said quietly. Robert smiled. Not a fake adult smile, but a real one that reached his eyes. "Hi, look, I know this is kind of random. My grandmother lives down the hall. She mentioned that you were having a birthday party today. She was excited about it this morning when I called her." Danny felt his face get hot. So Mrs. Chen had known. Of course she'd known. The walls in this building were thin enough that she probably heard every minute of his afternoon alone. "Yeah," he said, not sure what else to say. "The thing is," Robert continued, "I stopped by to visit my grandmother just now, and she told me that maybe the party didn't quite work out the way you planned, and I was thinking, well, I'm already here. My family's in town visiting. It's not too late to have a little celebration, is it? Would you mind if we joined you for a bit?" Danny stared at him. This man, this complete stranger, was asking to come to his birthday party, the party that nobody else had wanted to attend. It was so unexpected, so completely out of nowhere that Danny didn't know how to respond. Part of him wanted to say no, to close the door and hide from this embarrassing situation, but another part of him, the part that had spent the whole day hoping for exactly this, someone at his door, couldn't quite let go. "I don't know," Danny said honestly. "I mean, you don't have to." "I'm fine. I'm sure you are," Robert said gently. "But here's the thing. It's your birthday. Birthdays should be celebrated. And I've got my wife and daughter sitting in my grandmother's apartment right now. And between you and me, they're a little bored. We'd actually be doing them a favor by giving them something fun to do. So what do you say? Can we come in for a little while?" There was something about the way he said it, like Danny would be doing them a favor instead of the other way around. That made it easier. Danny took a breath and nodded. "Okay, I guess that would be all right." "Great." Robert's smile got bigger. "Give me just 2 minutes to grab everyone, okay?" Danny closed the door and stood in the middle of his living room, his heart pounding. What was happening? This felt surreal. He looked around at the apartment. The decorations were down. The snacks were put away. It didn't look like a party at all anymore. Should he put things back out? Should he try to make it look better? Before he could decide, there was another knock. Danny opened the door, and this time there were 3 people. Robert, a woman about his age who must be his wife, and a teenage girl, maybe 15 or 16. They were all smiling at him. "This is my wife, Lisa," Robert said. "And this is my daughter, Nicole. Everyone, this is Danny." "Happy birthday, Danny," Lisa said warmly. She was holding something, a plastic bag from the grocery store. "We made a quick stop on the way here. Hope that's okay." They came inside and Danny felt overwhelmed. His small apartment suddenly felt even smaller with 3 extra people in it. But it also felt different, fuller, less empty. Robert looked around and noticed the coffee table where Danny had started cleaning up. "Hey, you've got snacks. Perfect. Nicole, can you help set those back out?" He turned to Danny. "Where's your music?" "Every party needs music, right?" "I have a playlist," Danny said quietly. "It's on my phone." "Excellent. Let's get that going." Within minutes, his apartment transformed back into something resembling a party. Nicole, who seemed surprisingly willing to help despite being a teenager, put the chips and cookies back on the coffee table. Lisa pulled things out of her grocery bag, a cake from the bakery section of the store, paper plates, plastic forks. It wasn't a fancy cake, just a simple vanilla one with "Happy Birthday" written in blue icing. But it was more than Danny had expected anyone to bring him. Robert connected Danny's phone to a small speaker he'd brought from his grandmother's apartment, and suddenly there was music. The same playlist Danny had made, the one he'd turned off hours ago when it felt too sad to listen to alone. Now it filled the space, making everything feel more alive. "So how old are you today?" Nicole asked, sitting down on the couch. 12, Danny said. 12's a good age. Middle school, right? He nodded. "Middle school's tough," she said. Not in a condescending way, but like she actually remembered. "It gets better, though." I promise. There was another knock at the door. Danny opened it to find Mrs. Chen standing there, smiling. "I heard there was a party happening," she said. "I hope it's okay if I join." "Of course, grandmother," Robert said, helping her inside. "We're just getting started." Mrs. Chen was carrying a container. "I made some dumplings earlier. They're still warm. I thought maybe you could use some real food with all those chips." She winked at Danny and he found himself smiling. Actually smiling. This was really happening. His living room was filling up with people. Not the people he'd invited, not his classmates, but people. Real people who had chosen to come here and spend time with him. And then, because apparently this day was determined to surprise him, there was yet another knock. Danny opened the door to find a college-aged kid standing there, someone he vaguely recognized from the 3rd floor. "Hey, man. I'm Tyler. I live upstairs. I heard there was a birthday thing happening. Mrs. Chen mentioned it. Is it cool if I hang out for a bit? I've got nothing going on." Danny just nodded, too stunned to speak. Tyler came in with a worn deck of cards in his hand. I'm pretty good at card tricks. Want to see? The apartment was full now. Actually full. Robert and Lisa were setting out the cake. Mrs. Chen was arranging her dumplings on a plate. Nicole was scrolling through Danny's playlist, nodding along to the music. Tyler was shuffling his cards, and Danny stood in the middle of it all, trying to process what was happening. All right, Robert said, clapping his hands together. Before we do anything else, before we eat or play games or whatever, we need to sing. Danny, you sit right here. He pointed to the chair in the middle of the room, and Danny sat down, feeling self-conscious. Lisa lit the candles on the cake, 12 small flames flickering in the afternoon light coming through the windows. Everyone gathered around, and then they started singing. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Danny. Happy birthday to you. They weren't all on key. Mrs. Chen's voice wavered on the high notes, and Tyler was basically talking more than singing. But they were loud and enthusiastic, and when Danny looked around at their faces, everyone was smiling. At him, for him. Make a wish, Lisa said, holding the cake closer. Danny closed his eyes. He'd spent all day thinking about what he would wish for if anyone ever showed up. He'd thought about wishing for friends at school, for kids his age to like him, for tomorrow to be less awful than he knew it was going to be. But now, with these people around him, people who didn't know him but had shown up anyway, he wished for something different. He wished to remember this feeling. This moment, this surprise that had come out of nowhere and turned everything around. He opened his eyes and blew out all 12 candles in one breath. Everyone cheered, and Robert cut the cake while Lisa started handing out pieces on paper plates. Mrs. Chen offered around her dumplings, which turned out to be amazing, better than anything Danny had eaten in months. Tyler was showing Nicole a card trick, and she was pretending to be impressed even though Danny could tell she knew how it worked. So what do you like to do for fun? Robert asked, sitting down next to Danny with his own plate of cake. I read a lot, Danny said, and I like basketball, but I'm not very good at it. You play basketball? Nicole perked up. I'm on my school's team. Well, I was. I graduated last year, but I still play at the park sometimes. Really? Danny couldn't hide his surprise. Yeah, there's a court about 2 blocks from here, right? I saw it when we were parking. You ever go there? Sometimes. But usually nobody's there, or if they are, they're older and they don't want some kid hanging around. Nicole looked at her dad. What are we doing next Saturday? Robert shrugged. Nothing I know of. Cool. She turned back to Danny. I'll meet you at that court next Saturday. 2 o'clock. We can shoot around and I'll show you some drills if you want, deal? Danny couldn't believe what he was hearing. Deal, Danny said, trying to keep his voice steady. He didn't want to sound too excited, too desperate. But inside, his heart was doing something weird. Something hopeful. Tyler finished his card trick and started another one. Pick a card, any card, he said, fanning them out toward Mrs. Chen. She giggled like a little kid and pulled one out, holding it close to her chest so nobody could see. Don't show me, just remember it, Tyler instructed. He was good at this, making it feel mysterious and fun. When he finally revealed Mrs. Chen's card, she clapped her hands together in delight. How did you do that? Danny asked. Magic, Tyler said with a grin. Then he leaned closer. Or, practice. Lots of practice. I can teach you sometime if you want. Card tricks are great for breaking the ice with people. Give you something to do with your hands when you're nervous. That would be cool, Danny said. He'd never thought about that before, about having something like that. A skill, a thing he could do that might make other people interested in talking to him. Robert stood up and looked around the room. You know what this party needs? Games, Danny. You got any board games or anything? Not really, Danny admitted. They had an old deck of cards besides Tyler's and maybe a puzzle somewhere, but that was about it. His mom couldn't afford extras like board games, no problem. We can make our own fun. Robert looked around the small living room thinking, how about charades? Classic party game, no equipment needed. I'm terrible at charades, Lisa said, laughing, but I'll do it anyway. They spent the next hour playing charades, and it turned out Lisa wasn't kidding. She was hilariously bad at it, making gestures that looked nothing like what she was trying to act out. When she was supposed to be a monkey, she looked more like she was having some kind of medical episode. Everyone was laughing, including her. Nicole was competitive, getting frustrated when people didn't guess her words fast enough. Mrs. Chen kept coming up with the most obscure things to act out. Words like persnickety and flabbergasted. Danny found himself laughing harder than he had in months. Real laughing. The kind that made his stomach hurt and his eyes water. When it was his turn to act things out, he felt self-conscious at first, worried he'd look stupid. But everyone was so encouraging, shouting out guesses and cheering when someone got it right that he forgot to be nervous. Between rounds, they ate more cake and dumplings. Tyler taught Danny a simple card trick, walking him through it step by step until Danny could do it on his own. "That's it, you've got it," Tyler said when Danny successfully completed the trick for the first time. "See? Natural talent." Nicole asked Danny about school, about what classes he liked and what he wanted to be when he grew up. Nobody ever asked him stuff like that. He told her he liked science and that he thought maybe he wanted to be a doctor like his mom, or maybe a teacher. She nodded seriously, like his answer mattered. "My mom's a teacher," she said. "Elementary school. She loves it. Says it's hard but worth it." "That's what my mom says about nursing," Danny said. "She's always tired, but she says she likes helping people." "Your mom sounds cool," Nicole said. "Is she working today?" "Yeah, double shift. She won't be home until late." "That's rough," Nicole said. "Especially on your birthday." Danny shrugged, trying to act like it didn't bother him. "She has to work. We need the money." Nicole didn't say anything for a moment, just nodded. Then she said, "For what it's worth, I bet she feels bad about missing this." Parents always feel guilty about stuff like that even when they can't help it. The party went on. Robert suggested they do a scavenger hunt around the apartment building, and even though the building was small and kind of run down, everyone got into it. They split into teams. Danny paired with Nicole and had to find ridiculous things. A purple pen, something that smelled like lemon, a rock shaped like a heart. They raced through the hallways, knocking on neighbors' doors and asking if they had these random items. Most people thought it was funny and tried to help. Mr. Washington from the second floor donated a purple pen. The lady in apartment 3B gave them a lemon-scented candle. When they got back to Danny's apartment, breathless and laughing, Robert's team had won by finding a heart-shaped rock in the planter outside. But everyone got a prize anyway, pieces of candy that Lisa had in her purse. "Always prepared," she said, distributing them. As the evening wore on, Danny realized he was having the kind of birthday he'd always imagined, but thought only happened in movies. Not perfect. The apartment was still small and shabby. The decorations were from the dollar store. The people weren't kids his own age. But it was real. It was actually happening, and that made it better than any perfect party he'd dreamed up in his head. Around 7 o'clock, Mrs. Chen started getting tired. "I should head back," she said, standing slowly. "These old bones need rest." "I'll walk you back, grandmother," Robert said. "Thank you for coming," Danny said to her, and he meant it. "And for the dumplings. They were really good." She patted his cheek gently. "Happy birthday, dear boy. You deserve good things." The way she said it made Danny's throat tight, like she really meant it, like she saw something in him worth celebrating. Tyler left next, giving Danny his phone number. "Serious about those card tricks. Text me anytime you want to practice. And hey, if you ever need someone to talk to about school or whatever, I'm around." I remember being 12. It's not easy. Then it was just Robert, Lisa, and Nicole. They helped Danny clean up, putting away the leftover food and throwing out the paper plates. The apartment got quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not empty, just peaceful. "This was fun," Nicole said, grabbing her jacket. "I'll see you next Saturday, right? 2 o'clock at the basketball court. Don't forget." "I won't forget," Danny promised. Robert put a hand on Danny's shoulder. "Listen, I know today probably didn't start out the way you wanted it to, and I'm sorry about that. Kids can be cruel sometimes, even when they don't mean to be. But I want you to know something. What happened today, us showing up, that wasn't charity. We genuinely had a good time. You're a cool kid, Danny. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise." Danny nodded, not trusting himself to speak. If he tried to talk right now, he might cry, and he didn't want to do that in front of them. Lisa gave him a quick hug. "Happy birthday, and if you ever need anything, we're just down the hall at your neighbor's place pretty regularly. Don't be a stranger." When they left, Danny closed the door and stood in the middle of his living room. It was just after 7:30. His mom wouldn't be home for another 4 hours. But for the first time all day, being alone didn't feel terrible. The apartment still smelled like cake and dumplings. There were crumbs on the coffee table and a few stray napkins that had been missed in the cleanup. Evidence that people had been here, that something had happened. Danny walked to his bedroom and pulled out his phone. He opened his messages and started typing to his mom. "Hey Mom, hope work isn't too crazy. Just wanted to let you know I had a really good birthday. Better than I expected. Can't wait to tell you about it when you get home. Love you." He hit send and then sat on his bed looking around his room. It looked the same as it always did, but somehow everything felt different. The afternoon had been terrible, maybe the worst few hours of his life. The disappointment and loneliness had been real and crushing. But then something unexpected had happened. People had shown up. Strangers had become something else. Not exactly friends, not yet, but something. Danny thought about tomorrow, about walking into school and facing the kids who hadn't come. He was still nervous about it, still dreading it, honestly, but he also felt something else, something stronger. He felt like maybe what other people thought about him didn't define him as much as he'd believed. Maybe being liked by the popular kids at school wasn't the only thing that mattered. Maybe there were other ways to connect with people, other kinds of friendships. He pulled out the book he'd tried to read earlier and opened it to where he'd left off. This time the words made sense. He could actually focus on the story, lose himself in it. He read for an hour, comfortable in his quiet room, not feeling the need to fill the silence with television or distraction. Around 9 o'clock, Danny got hungry again. He went to the kitchen and pulled out the cupcake his mom had left for him, the one with the single candle stuck in the middle. He lit the candle with a match from the drawer and watched the small flame flicker. He'd already made a wish on the cake Robert and Lisa had brought. But this was his mom's cupcake. This one deserved its own wish. He closed his eyes and thought about it. What did he want? Really want? And then it came to him. He wished for courage. Courage to keep putting himself out there even when it was scary. Courage to talk to people even when he was afraid they'd reject him. Courage to believe that he was worth knowing, worth being friends with. Courage to try again. Danny blew out the candle and took a bite of the cupcake. It was sweet and a little stale. Probably from sitting in the discount bakery case for a day or two, but it tasted good to him. He ate it slowly, standing in the kitchen, thinking about everything that had happened. His phone buzzed. A text from his mom. "So glad you had a good day, sweetheart. Can't wait to hear all about it. Should be home by midnight. There's leftover chicken in the fridge if you're hungry. Love you more than anything." He smiled and texted back a heart emoji. Then he cleaned up the kitchen, washing the few dishes in the sink and wiping down the counters. His mom worked so hard. The least he could do was make sure she came home to a clean apartment. Around 11:30, Danny heard a key in the lock. He looked up from the book he was reading on the couch, surprised. His mom wasn't supposed to be home for another half hour. She came through the door looking exhausted, her scrubs wrinkled and her hair falling out of its ponytail. But when she saw him, her face lit up. "Hey, birthday boy," she said, dropping her bag by the door and coming to sit next to him on the couch. "They let me leave early. Things slowed down and my supervisor told me to get home to my kid." She pulled him into a hug. "I'm so sorry I had to work today. I know that's not how you wanted to spend your birthday." "It's okay, Mom, really." Danny hugged her back, breathing in the familiar smell of hospital soap and her perfume. "Actually, something pretty cool happened." "Yeah? Tell me everything," so he did. He told her about the morning, about setting everything up and waiting. He didn't hide the bad parts. He told her how nobody from school came, how he'd sat there for hours feeling sorry for himself. He saw her face fall, saw her eyes get shiny with tears she was trying to hold back. But then he told her about the knock on the door, about Robert and his family, about Mrs. Chen and Tyler, about the games and the cake and the laughter, about Nicole promising to play basketball with him. By the time he finished, his mom was crying for real, but she was also smiling. "Oh, honey," she said, wiping her eyes. "I'm so sorry the kids from school didn't come. That's their loss. But I'm so glad those people showed up for you. That's really special." "It was weird at first," Danny admitted. "I mean, they were all strangers. But then it wasn't weird anymore. It just felt nice. Like maybe it doesn't matter so much who shows up as long as someone does." His mom pulled him close again. "You're a lot wiser than most 12-year-olds, you know that?" "I don't know about that," Danny said. "I still feel pretty dumb most of the time." "Well, you're not. You're smart and kind and thoughtful. And those kids at school who didn't come, they're missing out on knowing a pretty great person. They sat there together for a while, not talking, just being close. Finally, his mom stood up and stretched. I'm exhausted. But we're doing something special this weekend, okay? Whatever you want. Movies, bowling, that Chinese restaurant you like. You name it. Can we just hang out here? Danny asked. Maybe watch a movie at home and order pizza? That sounds perfect, she said. She kissed the top of his head and headed to her bedroom. Danny stayed on the couch for a few more minutes thinking about the day. It had been the best and worst birthday he'd ever had. The disappointment of the afternoon had been real and painful. But so had the joy of the evening. Both things were true at the same time. Life was like that, he was starting to realize. Not all good or all bad, just complicated. The next day at school was as awkward as he'd feared. A few kids asked if he'd done anything for his birthday. He said he'd had a party and left it at that. Nobody asked for details, and he didn't offer any. Nobody apologized for not coming. Most of them probably didn't even remember the invitations. It had been such a small thing to them, so easily forgotten. To Danny, it had been everything. But he was learning that people existed in their own worlds, dealing with their own stuff. It wasn't always personal. At lunch, he sat in his usual spot with his book. But this time, when a kid named Alex walked by and nodded at him, Danny nodded back. It was a small thing, but it was something. That Saturday, Danny showed up at the basketball court at exactly 2 o'clock. He was nervous that Nicole wouldn't come, that she'd forgotten or changed her mind. But at 2:15, she came jogging up, a basketball under her arm and a smile on her face. Sorry I'm late, she said. My dad had to drop me off and he couldn't find parking. They played for 2 hours. Nicole was really good, but she was patient with him. She showed him how to position his hands for a better shot, how to pivot without traveling, how to defend without fouling. Danny was sweaty and tired by the time they finished, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that came from actually doing something instead of just sitting around. Same time next week? Nicole asked as they were leaving. Definitely, Danny said, and she did come back the next week, and the week after that. Sometimes she brought friends from her old high school. By the 4th week, there were usually 5 or 6 people at the court on Saturday afternoons. Danny got better at basketball. He also got better at talking to people, at being part of a group. These weren't kids his age, but that didn't seem to matter. They treated him like he belonged there. Tyler did teach him card tricks. They met up every couple of weeks at the coffee shop near the building, and Tyler showed him more elaborate tricks. The secret to magic, Tyler told him once, is confidence. You have to sell it. Even if you mess up, you act like it's part of the show. Danny started using that advice in other parts of his life. When he had to do a presentation in English class, he pretended he was performing a magic trick. He stood up straight, made eye contact, spoke clearly. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than before. His teacher commented that he seemed more confident. Mrs. Chen invited him over for dinner sometimes. She taught him how to make dumplings, her hands guiding his as he folded the wrappers. She told him stories about immigrating to America 50 years ago, about how lonely she'd been at first, how hard it was to make friends when you didn't speak the language well. But you keep trying, she said. You keep showing up. Eventually you find your people. Danny thought about that a lot. Find your people. Not just any people, but yours. The ones who got you, who wanted to spend time with you. Maybe his people weren't at his school. Maybe that was okay. He did make one friend at school eventually. A kid named Owen transferred in after winter break. He was quiet and into science fiction, and he ate lunch alone the first week. Danny recognized that look, that careful watching of other people trying to figure out where to fit in. So he asked if Owen wanted to sit with him. They didn't become best friends right away. It wasn't like in movies where one conversation changes everything, but they started eating lunch together. They found out they liked the same books. They started working on science projects together. It was a slow kind of friendship, but it was real. Months passed. Danny's 13th birthday came around. This time he didn't send out invitations to his whole class. He didn't try to have a big party. Instead, his mom took the day off work. They slept in late and made pancakes together. In the afternoon, Nicole came by and they played basketball. Tyler stopped over with a new card trick to show him. Mrs. Chen brought dumplings, of course. Owen came over for the first time, nervous about meeting Danny's other friends. But Nicole made him feel welcome by talking about the science fiction books she'd read. It was a small gathering, just 6 people in his living room, but it was full of laughter and genuine connection. When they sang Happy Birthday, Danny looked around at these people who'd somehow become part of his life. His mom, who worked so hard for him, Mrs. Chen, who'd seen him alone and cared enough to do something about it. Robert's family, who'd shown up for a kid they didn't know. Tyler, who'd taken time to teach him things. Owen, who understood what it was like to feel like an outsider. "Make a wish," his mom said, holding the cake. Danny closed his eyes. He thought back to his 12th birthday, to sitting alone in his decorated apartment, feeling like his life would always be lonely. He thought about the knock on the door that had changed everything, not because it fixed all his problems or magically gave him popularity, but because it taught him something important. He'd learned that kindness could come from unexpected places. That community wasn't something you were born into, but something you could build. That being rejected by some people didn't mean you weren't worth knowing, that there were different kinds of friendship, and they were all valuable. That showing up mattered whether someone was showing up for you or you were showing up for someone else. He'd also learned that life rarely went according to plan. That disappointment was real and painful, but it didn't have to be the end of the story. That sometimes the worst days could turn into something meaningful if you stayed open to possibility. Danny opened his eyes and blew out 13 candles. Everyone cheered. His mom cut the cake while Nicole and Owen argued about which science fiction series was better. Tyler was teaching Mrs. Chen a new card trick, and she was laughing at how bad she was at it. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and his mom had fallen asleep on the couch, Danny sat in his room with his journal. He'd started keeping one after his 12th birthday, writing down his thoughts and experiences. He wanted to remember things, not just the good parts, but all of it. He wrote about his 13th birthday, about how different it was from the year before, about how far he'd come. Then he flipped back to the entry from his 12th birthday, the one he'd written late that night after Robert and his family had left.